Number 10. Shamsiel, the watcher who abandoned heaven before the flood. Before Noah entered the ark, before the world described by the Book of Enoch descended into violence, there was a rebellion, not among humans, in heaven. According to 1st Enoch, a group of heavenly beings known as the Watchers looked down upon the daughters of humanity and desired them. They decided to descend. Among the names preserved in the ancient text is Shamsiel, sometimes rendered Shamsiel or Shamshiel in later transliterations. His name is commonly connected with the sun, but whatever his original role may have been, in the Enochic story, he becomes associated with a group that crossed a boundary never meant to be crossed. The surviving Book of Enoch is not part of the biblical canon used by most Jewish and Christian traditions today, although one Enoch remains canonical in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Fragments discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran demonstrated that Enochic literature circulated in Jewish communities more than 2,000 years ago. This was not a medieval invention. The nightmare is ancient. In 1st Enoch 6, approximately 200 watchers descend upon Mount Hermon. Their leader, usually rendered Semyaza or Shemihaza, fears that the others may abandon their plan and leave him alone to suffer the consequences. So they swear an oath. Together, no one turns back. The text then preserves the names of their leaders, among them, Shamsiel. Later traditions and translations sometimes associate Shamsiel with knowledge concerning the signs of the sun, although manuscript traditions and lists of watchers can vary, and we should be careful not to build an entire biography from a few surviving lines. Enoch does not give us a detailed personal story for Shamsiel. It gives us something more unsettling, a name inside a conspiracy. The Watchers take human wives. They reveal knowledge that heavenly beings were not supposed to give humanity. Different figures become associated with sorcery, celestial signs, weapon-making, enchantments, astrology, and other forbidden arts. Then their offspring appear, the giants, and the world begins to collapse. The giants consume what humanity produces. When those resources are exhausted, the violence escalates. Blood fills the earth. Creation itself seems to turn against its intended order. What began as desire becomes catastrophe. Then heaven responds. The archangels observe what has happened. Judgment is commanded. This is where modern retellings often distort the story. The Book of Enoch does not tell us that Shamsiel specifically was chained beneath the ocean floor in an individually identified underwater prison. It does, however, describe severe imprisonment for the rebellious watchers. In 1st Enoch 10, the judgment against their leader and companions involves being bound beneath the earth for generations until the final judgment. Elsewhere in Enoch's journeys, he is shown terrifying cosmic prisons associated with rebellious heavenly beings. Dark places, abysses, places from which escape is impossible. The geography is visionary and cosmological, rather than a map archaeologists could follow to coordinates beneath a modern ocean. But imagine how the story sounded 2,000 years ago. The rebels were not simply destroyed, they were kept. Judgment was delayed. The beings who violated the boundary between heaven and earth remained imprisoned somewhere within the architecture of creation, waiting for an appointed end. That is far more disturbing than a monster that simply dies. A dead thing belongs to the past. A sealed thing belongs to the future. And Shamsiel represents the first name in our descent into that prison. We know almost nothing about him as an individual. No grave has been found. No archaeological discovery proves that Shamsiel existed as a biological, supernatural being. No expedition has located a watcher beneath the sea. What archaeology has recovered is the tradition itself. Fragments of Enoch survive among manuscripts from Qumran, preserving evidence that ancient Jewish communities copied and transmitted stories about heavenly rebellion, giants, forbidden knowledge, and divine imprisonment centuries before many later Christian traditions developed. The physical manuscripts are real. The beings belong to the religious world described within them. That distinction matters, because the mystery is not whether sonar will someday detect Shamsiel sleeping beneath an ocean trench. The mystery is why ancient communities imagined evil this way. Not annihilated, contained, bound, hidden away until judgment. Perhaps imprisonment was more frightening precisely because it preserved the threat. The Watchers had entered the human world once. They had changed it. They had given humanity knowledge it was never supposed to possess. And according to Enoch's vision, heaven made certain they would never freely walk the earth again. But Shamsiel was only one name. Another Watcher was associated with something humans had feared since the first storms crossed the ancient sky: lightning. His name was Raphael, and he too had descended upon Mount Hermon. Number 9. Raphael, the Watcher who taught humanity the secrets of the sky. Before humans understood electricity, lightning must have looked like a weapon. A white fracture appearing without warning across the heavens. Thunder followed. Trees exploded. Homes burned. People died beneath a sky they could neither predict nor control. And among the names preserved in the ancient tradition of the Watchers appears one frequently rendered as Raphael or Barakel, a name commonly connected with lightning. But Raphael's importance in the Book of Enoch is stranger than his name alone, because he belonged to a rebellion in which heavenly knowledge crossed into the human world. And according to the story, humanity was not ready for what it received. In 1 Enoch 6, Raphael appears among the leaders associated with the approximately 200 Watchers who descended upon Mount Hermon. Their decision was collective. They desired human women. Their leader, Semyaza, feared that he alone might ultimately be blamed. So the Watchers bound themselves together with an oath. The mountain became the location of a cosmic crime. They descended. They took wives. Then they began to teach. The surviving textual tradition assigns different forms of forbidden knowledge to different Watchers. Spellings and associations vary between manuscripts and translations, so assigning perfectly fixed roles to every named being can be misleading. In 1 Enoch 8, a figure commonly rendered Archangel is associated with teaching astrology. Another teaches the constellations. Another, the signs of the earth. Another, the signs of the sun. Another, the course of the moon. To an ancient audience, this was not harmless astronomy. The heavens represented order. The movements of stars and planets could be interpreted as signs. Knowledge of the sky meant knowledge of patterns inaccessible to ordinary people. The Watchers were revealing what belonged above, below. And that violation becomes one of Enoch's central horrors. The problem is not knowledge itself. The problem is knowledge arriving before humanity is morally prepared to control it. Elsewhere in the story, Azazel teaches weapons and metallurgy associated with warfare. Other Watchers reveal enchantments and secret arts. The consequences accumulate. Human society becomes more capable and more violent. Then the giants are born. The children produced by the union between Watchers and women grow into destructive beings whose appetite overwhelms the world. They consume human resources, then animals, then humanity itself. The earth cries out because of the blood being spilled upon it. The heavenly teachers have not created enlightenment. They have accelerated catastrophe. Raphael, therefore, represents something more disturbing than a lightning spirit. He represents forbidden understanding. The sky once belonged to mystery. Then someone began explaining its patterns. And in the worldview preserved by Enoch, some knowledge had boundaries. Cross them, and civilization could become dangerous. There is no archaeological evidence that Raphael existed as a physical, supernatural being. No ancient observatory has produced the remains of a Watcher. And 1 Enoch does not state that Raphael personally lies beneath a specific location on the modern ocean floor. The imprisonment described in Enoch is cosmic and theological. After the rebellion, divine judgment falls upon the Watchers. Their freedom ends. The beings who descended into humanity's world are condemned to confinement until the appointed judgment. That image survived for centuries. Fragments of Enochic writings recovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls demonstrate that stories of the Watchers circulated in ancient Judaism long before modern occultism or ancient astronaut literature transformed them. The manuscripts are archaeological objects. The supernatural claims belong to the texts they preserve. And perhaps that is enough, because the idea behind Borachio remains disturbingly modern. Every civilization eventually discovers knowledge capable of exceeding its wisdom. Metal becomes a sword. Chemistry becomes poison. Physics becomes a weapon capable of destroying cities. Knowledge does not decide what humans will do with it. Humans decide. The authors and transmitters of the Enochic tradition expressed that fear through angels. Something descended from above. Something taught us too much. And once the knowledge entered the human world, it could never truly be taken back. The Watchers could be bound. Their teachers could disappear. But humanity would remember the lesson. That may be the punishment hidden beneath the punishment. Heaven imprisoned the beings. It did not erase what they had taught. And deeper within the Enochic tradition appears another name connected not merely with observing the heavens, but with the stars themselves. Kokabeel, a watcher whose name evokes the celestial lights above humanity. Another teacher, another rebel, another being who crossed the boundary and could never return unchanged. Number 8. Kokabeel, the watcher who revealed the secrets of the stars. Long before telescopes, the night sky was darker than anything most humans experience today. Thousands of stars stretched from horizon to horizon. They moved with patterns so precise that ancient observers could use them to measure seasons, navigate across landscapes, and anticipate the rhythms of agriculture. But the stars also presented a terrifying question. Who had placed them there? And who understood what they meant? In the tradition preserved by the Book of Enoch, one of the beings who descended from heaven carried a name intimately connected with those lights: Kokabeel. His name is commonly interpreted from a Semitic root associated with stars, and variants such as Kokabel or Cockabel appear across translations and later traditions. Like Shamsiel and Barachiel, Kokabel belongs to the terrifying memory of the Watchers, the heavenly beings who came down, crossed the boundary, and gave humanity knowledge that was supposed to remain hidden. In 1 Enoch 6, Kokabel appears among the leaders connected with the approximately 200 Watchers who swear their oath on Mount Hermon. But in the following chapters, the story becomes more specific. The Watchers begin teaching. Azazel reveals weapons and metalworking associated with warfare. Others teach enchantments. Astrological knowledge appears. The movements and signs of celestial bodies become part of the forbidden information entering the human world. In common translations of 1 Enoch 8, a figure rendered Kokabel is associated with teaching the constellations. This distinction matters. Enoch does not provide a detailed biography of Kokabel standing beneath the stars explaining modern astronomy. The surviving text is brief. Ancient manuscripts and translations vary. Later angelological traditions expanded many figures far beyond what 1 Enoch itself actually says. But the core image remains. A heavenly being taught humans something about the organization of the stars. To us, that may sound almost harmless. To the ancient world, it was power. Understanding recurring celestial patterns allowed communities to measure time. The sky could guide travelers. Seasonal cycles could influence planting and harvesting. Eclipses and unusual celestial events could become political or religious omens. Priests and rulers across ancient civilizations invested enormous attention in observing the heavens. To know the sky was, in a sense, to know something about the machinery of time itself. And Enoch places some of that knowledge within a story of transgression. Not because stars are evil, but because the Watchers violated the distinction between heavenly and earthly realms. They brought down secrets. Then the world deteriorated. Their unions with human women produced the giants. Violence expanded. Blood was spilled. Humanity learned new arts, but did not become wiser. Knowledge increased alongside corruption. This is one of the darkest ideas hidden inside the Watcher's narrative. Civilization can advance without becoming better. A species can understand more of the universe while becoming more capable of destroying itself. The Watchers accelerate human knowledge, but they do not improve human morality. Eventually, divine judgment comes. The giants are destroyed. The rebellious heavenly beings lose their freedom. Enochic texts describe the Watchers being bound and confined until the final judgment. But again, we must separate the ancient text from the modern title of this story. First Enoch does not specifically say Kokabeel was individually chained beneath the physical ocean floor. Its prisons belong to an ancient cosmology of underground depths, darkness, abyss-like places, and cosmic confinement. Later readers can easily imagine these locations beneath mountains or oceans. The text itself does not give us coordinates. No submarine expedition can simply travel there. No archaeological evidence has established that Kokabeel existed as a physical celestial being. What survives physically are manuscripts. Fragments of Enochic literature found among the Dead Sea Scrolls show that these stories circulated more than 2,000 years ago. And that archaeological reality makes the mythology more haunting. Someone copied this name. Someone believed the story mattered enough to preserve. Generation after generation repeated the warning. There were secrets above us. Beings crossed the boundary. Humanity received knowledge. And afterward, the world became worse. Perhaps Kokabeel was never intended to represent an astronomical teacher in any modern scientific sense. Perhaps the story reflects an ancient suspicion of specialized celestial knowledge, knowledge controlled by elites, diviners, or outsiders. Perhaps it reflects something more universal. Every new discovery gives humanity another form of power. Fire warms a settlement and burns an enemy. Metal creates tools and swords. The atom illuminates cities and destroys them. The stars themselves eventually taught humanity how insignificant our world really is. Knowledge opens the universe. It also removes our innocence. That is what makes Kokabeel frightening. The Watcher can be imprisoned. The teacher can be bound. But once humanity looks upward and understands what it sees, the secret cannot be sealed again. And the next, being in Enoch's tradition, supposedly revealed something even more permanent. Not stars, not weapons, writing itself. His name was Penimue. Number 7. Penemu, the Watcher who taught humanity how to write. Before books, before libraries, before kings carved their victories into stone, human memory had a limit. A person could learn something. They could teach it to their children. Those children could repeat it. But eventually, memories changed. Words disappeared. And when the last person who remembered something died, knowledge could die with them. Then, humanity learned how to make thought survive the human body. Writing. Today, we consider it one of civilization's greatest inventions. But in one of the darkest passages associated with the Book of Enoch, writing is presented from a much more disturbing perspective. It was knowledge connected with a heavenly rebel. His name was Penimue. Penimue appears not in the earliest Watcher list of 1 Enoch 6, but later in the work, particularly in 1 Enoch 69, within material commonly associated with the Book of Parables. That distinction matters. The Book of Enoch is not a single text written by one author at one moment. It is a collection of Enochic writings produced and transmitted across different periods in ancient Judaism. And in chapter 69, another catalog of rebellious beings appears. Among them, Penimue. The text assigns him a strange crime. He taught humanity something described as bitter and sweet. Then it becomes more specific. Penimue taught humans to write using ink and paper, or, depending on translation, ink and writing material. To modern readers, this seems almost impossible to understand as corruption. Writing gave civilization administration, law, history, mathematics, literature, scientific knowledge. Without writing, almost everything we know about ancient civilizations would have disappeared. Even the Book of Enoch itself survived because people wrote it down. So why would a tradition place writing among forbidden teachings? The answer lies in how the text frames knowledge. In 1 Enoch 69, humanity's acquisition of writing is connected with error and corruption. The problem is not necessarily that every written word is evil. Rather, writing becomes part of a larger anxiety about knowledge crossing boundaries. A secret spoken aloud can disappear. A secret written down can survive centuries. A dangerous idea no longer dies with the person who discovered it. It can be copied, transported, translated, multiplied. One human mind can now influence thousands of people it will never meet. For the ancient world, that was extraordinary power, and power could preserve lies as easily as truth. Penemoi's lesson, therefore, represents something different from Azazel's weapons or Kokobil's celestial knowledge. A sword can kill a person. Writing can preserve an idea long after everyone involved is dead. Perhaps that is why the story feels strangely modern. Humanity eventually created technologies capable of storing more information than ancient civilizations could have imagined. Clay tablets became manuscripts. Manuscripts became printing presses. Printing became digital networks. Now an idea can cross the planet almost instantly. Knowledge has become nearly impossible to contain. And the same problem remains. Truth travels. So does deception. Medicine spreads. So do instructions for destruction. Wisdom survives. So does hatred. The technology itself does not decide what deserves immortality. Humans do. There is no archaeological evidence that Penemu physically appeared and invented writing for humanity. Writing developed independently in several ancient societies through processes archaeologists can investigate materially. Mesopotamian writing emerged gradually from earlier systems of accounting and symbolic notation during the late 4th millennium BC. Egypt developed its own early writing traditions. Other systems appeared elsewhere. Nothing requires supernatural intervention. And 1 Enoch does not state that Penemu personally lies chained beneath a specific ocean trench. The imagery of imprisonment belongs to the broader judgment of rebellious heavenly beings within Enochic cosmology. Modern descriptions of watchers sleeping beneath the ocean floor go beyond what the ancient text actually says. But Penemu does not need to be physically beneath an ocean to make the story unsettling. Because his supposed gift escaped its teacher. The being could be punished. The knowledge could not. That may be the deeper horror running through Enoch. Heaven responds to the watchers by restraining the rebels. But humanity continues living with what entered the world. Weapons remain. Celestial knowledge remains. Writing remains. The forbidden lesson becomes civilization. And there is something almost paradoxical about Penemu's story surviving at all. Ancient scribes copied the accusation against writing by writing it down. Fragments of Enochic literature survived for centuries because human beings continued practicing the very technology the tradition associated with dangerous heavenly instruction. Penemu disappeared into religious memory. The ink remained, the words remained, and more than 2,000 years later, we are still reading them. But the next watcher was associated with knowledge far darker than preserving words. The tradition connects him with spirits, harmful secret arts, and attacks against human life before birth. His name was Casdeja, and what he supposedly taught humanity was not how to remember. It was how to harm. Number 6. Casdeja, the watcher who taught humanity how to destroy life. Some knowledge creates civilizations. Other knowledge teaches civilizations how to destroy themselves. In the later chapters of the Book of Enoch, among the names associated with the rebellion of heavenly beings, there appears a figure whose teachings are described in unusually disturbing terms. His name is rendered differently across translations: Casdeja, sometimes Casdea or Casdeael. Unlike Azazel, whose forbidden knowledge is associated with weapons and metalworking, Casdeja's secrets were more intimate. They concerned the human body, spirits, disease. And according to 1 Enoch 69, ways of harming life before it had even entered the world. Kazdea appears within the same section of Enochic tradition that names Pinamu. This is important because he is not given a detailed narrative like the Watchers descending upon Mount Hermon in chapters 6 to 8. Instead, chapter 69 preserves lists of rebellious beings and the forbidden knowledge attributed to them. The surviving translations vary considerably in wording, but the general picture is dark. Kazdea is associated with teaching humans about wicked attacks by spirits and demons. The passage also connects him with attacks upon the embryo in the womb. Some translations additionally contain references interpreted as knowledge concerning snakebite or harmful blows. The language is ancient. The manuscript tradition is complicated. We should not pretend that Enoch is describing modern medicine, abortion procedures, biological warfare, or genetic manipulation. Those are later interpretations imposed upon a text written in an entirely different intellectual world. But what the text actually describes is disturbing enough. Kazdea teaches knowledge capable of reaching into the most vulnerable boundaries of human existence: the body, pregnancy, illness, death. To ancient people, these were regions filled with uncertainty. A person could appear healthy in the morning and die before nightfall. A pregnancy could suddenly fail. A child could develop a fever no one understood. A snake could strike from beneath a stone. Disease could move through a household without anyone seeing what carried it. There were no microscopes, no germ theory, no understanding of viruses or chromosomes. Invisible forces seemed to attack human bodies from somewhere beyond ordinary perception. In such a world, demons provided an explanation. And Kazdea represented someone who knew their secrets. That is what makes his place within Enoch's larger story so unsettling. The Watchers do not merely bring humanity technology, they bring access. Access to things humans were never supposed to understand: celestial patterns, weapons, enchantments, writing, and now, knowledge of invisible forces capable of harming human life. Again, the pattern repeats. The teacher gives humanity power. Humanity uses it inside a world already collapsing into violence. Then divine judgment comes. The Watchers lose their freedom. The giants born from their transgression are destroyed. The rebellious heavenly beings are condemned to imprisonment until the final judgment. But modern retellings often go further than the surviving text. First Enoch does not say Kazdea himself was sealed beneath a particular ocean floor. There is no named underwater chamber, no geographic location, no depth. Enochic cosmology contains terrifying places of confinement, darkness, subterranean depths, and cosmic punishment. But turning those visions into a literal prison beneath a modern ocean trench is speculation. Nor has archaeology discovered Kazdea. There are no chains beneath the seabed that can be identified as belonging to a Watcher. No non-human skeleton proves his existence. What survives is the ancient literature itself. And perhaps the literature reveals something more interesting than a monster waiting beneath the sea. It reveals what ancient humans feared about knowledge. Because knowledge concerning the body has always possessed two faces. Learn how the body works, and you can heal it. Learn how the body works, and you can hurt it more efficiently. Understand poison, and you may discover an antidote. Understand disease, and you may learn how it spreads. The boundary between medicine and harm is often not the knowledge itself. It is intention. That makes Kazdea different from a simple demon. He represents the nightmare of knowledge without morality. A secret enters human hands. The being who revealed it disappears, but the consequences remain. Perhaps that is why Enoch's Watchers are imprisoned rather than merely forgotten. Their punishment establishes a boundary. There are things above humanity. There are things below humanity. And there are doors that should never have been opened between them. Kazdea crossed one of those doors. According to the tradition, heaven eventually closed it behind him. But whatever knowledge had already escaped could not be imprisoned with its teacher. And the next figure would be accused of an even greater corruption. Not merely teaching humanity how to harm. According to 1 Enoch 69, he became connected with the deception of Eve herself. and with the weapons through which humans learned to kill one another. His name was Gadriel. Number 5. Gadriel, the Watcher who gave humanity the weapons of death. Before Cain murdered Abel, before armies marched behind kings, before bronze blades and iron swords turned human conflict into organized slaughter, the Book of Enoch describes a heavenly being connected with an older corruption. His name was Gadriel, and among all the figures named in the later Enochic tradition, his accusations are unusually severe. According to 1 Enoch 69, Gadriel was associated with deceiving Eve. But the text does not stop there. It also connects him with the weapons through which human beings learn to kill one another, the instruments of death, the shield, the breastplate, the sword, and warfare itself. Gadriel appears in the Book of Parables, the section of 1 Enoch generally comprising chapters 37 to 71. This material is distinct from the earlier Watcher's narrative in chapters 6 to 16, so we should be careful not to merge every named rebel into one perfectly consistent biography. Enochic literature developed through multiple textual layers. Names vary between manuscripts, traditions overlap. But in chapter 69, Gadriel's role is clear enough to be disturbing. He is described as one who led Eve astray. This immediately recalls the serpent of Genesis. Yet 1 Enoch does not simply provide a straightforward statement that Gadriel was Satan. Later Jewish and Christian traditions developed different identities for the serpent, Satan, fallen angels, and demonic beings. Treating all of them as one character would erase those distinctions. Gadriel belongs to Enoch's own strange theological landscape. And then comes the second accusation. He showed humanity the weapons of death. This creates an intriguing overlap with Azazel, who in 1 Enoch 8 teaches humans to manufacture swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. The traditions are not arranged like a modern encyclopedia, where every invention belongs exclusively to one angel. Instead, several rebellious figures become connected with the broader corruption of humanity through forbidden knowledge. What matters is the pattern. Heaven possesses knowledge. A rebel crosses the boundary. Humanity receives it. Blood follows. Imagine the transformation from the perspective of an ancient storyteller. Humans had always been capable of violence. A stone could kill. A wooden club could crush bone. But metallurgy changed the scale and efficiency of conflict. Ore could be extracted from rock. Fire could transform it. Metal could be shaped deliberately into an edge designed to enter another human body. Technology had learned the anatomy of death. A sword was not merely discovered in nature. Someone had to imagine it. Someone had to teach someone else how to make it. An Enochic tradition pushed that chain of instruction upward. The knowledge came from beings who should never have given it. There is no archaeological evidence that Gadriel physically introduced weapons to prehistoric humanity. Archaeology instead documents long, gradual histories of weapon development across different regions and periods. Stone projectile points predate metallurgy by tens of thousands of years. Copper, bronze, and later iron technologies emerged through human experimentation and cultural transmission. No supernatural teacher is required. And despite the title of this countdown, 1 Enoch never says Gadriel was individually sealed beneath a specific ocean floor. The imprisonment imagery belongs to the larger judgment against rebellious heavenly beings. Enoch describes places of darkness and confinement within an ancient cosmic geography. Turning those places into a literal prison beneath the Pacific or Atlantic is a modern interpretation. But the ancient story contains a more disturbing punishment. The teacher can be removed. The weapon remains. Gadriel can disappear from the earth. The sword does not. Once humans know how to transform metal into an instrument of organized killing, heaven cannot make them forget. That idea runs like a shadow through the entire Watcher's tradition. Forbidden knowledge is irreversible. You cannot uninvent writing. You cannot make humanity stop observing the stars. You cannot erase knowledge of metallurgy once thousands possess it. And you cannot return a weapon to innocence after someone discovers what it can do. Perhaps that is why Gadriel's association with Eve is so appropriate within the logic of the story. Both narratives revolve around crossing a boundary of knowledge. Something forbidden becomes known. The world afterward is permanently different from the world before. Humanity gains something. Humanity loses something. And there is no road back. Gadriel therefore represents more than another fallen being waiting for judgment. He represents the moment knowledge becomes irreversible. The blade survives its maker. The technique survives its teacher. The violence survives the civilization that invented it. Thousands of years later, ancient swords are pulled from graves with their owners reduced to dust. The metal remembers what the human body cannot. But Gadriel was still not the leader of the rebellion. Higher in the hierarchy stood the being who understood the danger before the Watchers ever descended. He knew punishment would come. He feared being abandoned by the others. So on Mount Hermon, he demanded an oath that would bind them all to the same crime. His name was Semyaza. Number 4. Semyaza, the leader who made 200 angels swear they would never turn back. Before the Watchers descended, one of them hesitated, not because he had changed his mind, because he understood what would happen if the others did. His name appears in different translations as Semyaza, Semjaza, or Shemihaza, and in the oldest surviving Watchers narrative of 1st Enoch, he stands at the center of the rebellion. The story begins in 1st Enoch 6. Humanity has multiplied across the earth. The Watchers, heavenly beings described as sons of heaven, see the daughters of men and desire them. They decide to take human wives. But Semyaza sees the danger. He tells the others that he fears they will refuse to complete the act, leaving him alone to suffer punishment for what they are about to do. The solution is chilling, an oath. All of them must swear together. If one falls, they all fall. According to the text, approximately 200 Watchers descend upon Mount Hermon. There they bind themselves by mutual curses and solemn commitments. The name Hermon itself is connected within the narrative to this act of binding. A mountain becomes the place where heaven's rebellion acquires permanence. After the oath, the boundary collapses. The Watchers take human women. They establish relationships with them. They reveal knowledge forbidden to humanity. Weapons, enchantments, celestial signs, secret arts. Then the women give birth. The offspring become the giants. What follows is not portrayed as the beginning of a golden age. It is ecological and social collapse. The giants consume what humans produce. When human resources can no longer satisfy them, violence escalates. Animals are attacked. Humans become victims. Blood spreads across the earth. The world created by the Watcher's decision becomes something heaven can no longer tolerate. And Semyaza's original fear becomes reality. Judgment comes. In 1st Enoch 10, the archangel Michael receives instructions concerning Semyaza and those associated with him. They are to be bound. The text describes confinement for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the day of their judgment. Afterward comes the final punishment: fire. The rebellion that began on a mountain ends beneath the world. But this is where the modern image of Watchers imprisoned beneath the ocean must be treated carefully. 1st Enoch does not say Semyaza is chained beneath a specific modern ocean floor. It does not identify the Mariana Trench, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, or any archaeological location that could be searched. The language belongs to ancient Jewish cosmology, valleys of the earth, darkness, abyss-like prisons, and supernatural places awaiting final judgment. Later traditions and modern retellings often turn that cosmic geography into literal underground or underwater prisons. The original text is stranger and less geographically precise. There is also no archaeological evidence that Semyaza existed as a physical, non-human being. What archaeology has recovered are traces of the belief. Aramaic fragments of Enochic literature, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, show that traditions surrounding the Watchers circulated in ancient Jewish communities more than 2,000 years ago. Someone copied this rebellion onto parchment. Someone preserved the names. Someone considered the story important enough that it survived after kingdoms, languages, and communities disappeared. And Semyaza may be the most psychologically interesting watcher, because he apparently understands the consequences before committing the crime. He is not ignorant. He does not accidentally cross the boundary. He fears punishment, then creates a mechanism ensuring everyone crosses it together. That is frighteningly human. People become capable of actions in groups that they might never attempt alone. Responsibility becomes distributed. Fear becomes loyalty. The individual no longer asks whether the act is wrong, only whether everyone else will remain beside him when the consequences arrive. The oath on Mount Hermon transforms personal desire into collective catastrophe. 200 beings descend together, but heaven does not allow numbers to dilute responsibility. According to Enoch, they are bound together again, this time not by an oath, by punishment. The symmetry is almost perfect. On Mount Hermon, they voluntarily bind themselves to rebellion. Beneath the earth, divine judgment binds them so they cannot escape it. The first binding creates the crime. The second ensures they remain there until judgment. And somewhere deeper inside the Enochic story stands a figure even more infamous than their leader, a being whose name would survive for thousands of years. He taught humans how to make swords, knives, shields, armor. He transformed knowledge hidden within the earth into instruments capable of opening human flesh. And when judgment came, the archangel Raphael was commanded to bind him, cast him into Dudael, and cover him in darkness. His name was Azazel. Number 3. Azazel, the Watcher, buried beneath the rocks until Judgment Day. There are names that survive because people worshipped them. Others survive because people feared them. Azazel belongs to the second category. Among all the beings connected with the rebellion in the Book of Enoch, few receive a punishment described with such terrifying physical detail. He is not merely condemned, he is bound, dragged into darkness, thrown into a desolate place, buried beneath jagged stones, and left there, waiting for the day when even that prison will no longer be enough. Azazel appears prominently in 1 Enoch 8, while other watchers reveal celestial signs, enchantments, and secret knowledge. Azazel teaches humanity something brutally practical: how to make swords. Knives, shields, breastplates. He teaches humans about metals and how they can be worked. The text also associates him with ornaments, cosmetics, precious stones, and forms of adornment. The result is corruption. Human beings learn how to transform materials hidden inside the earth into objects capable of increasing both beauty and violence. Later, in 1 Enoch 9, the heavenly beings witnessing the catastrophe specifically accuse Azazel of revealing eternal secrets that were kept in heaven. Humanity has learned what it was never supposed to know, and blood covers the earth. Then God responds. In 1 Enoch 10, the archangel Raphael receives an order. The language is extraordinary. Azazel is to be bound hand and foot. Then Raphael must cast him into darkness. The location is identified as Dudael, a desert or wilderness place, whose precise geographic identification remains uncertain. Raphael opens a place in the desert, throws Azazel inside, and places rough, jagged stones over him. Darkness is commanded to cover his face. He is to remain there until the great day of judgment. This is where the title of our countdown requires an important correction. Azazel is the strongest example of an Enochic being physically sealed away. But the Book of Enoch does not say he was imprisoned beneath the ocean floor. His prison is Dudael, a desolate, earthly, or cosmological location. Attempts to identify it with a modern desert, canyon, abyss, or submarine location remain speculative. There is no archaeological evidence that Azazel lies beneath a geological formation somewhere on Earth, but the original description is arguably more frightening than the modern version, because Azazel is not dead. Within the logic of the text, he is being contained. His punishment has stages. First, imprisonment, then judgment. Only afterward comes the final fire. The being who corrupted humanity is forced to remain inside creation while history continues above him. Generations are born, cities rise, empires collapse. Humanity continues using metal. Humanity continues making weapons. And Azazel waits. The irony is brutal. He can be imprisoned. His knowledge cannot. By the Bronze Age, weapons had become increasingly sophisticated. By the Iron Age, entire armies carried metal blades. Thousands of years later, humanity learned to build weapons Azazel's ancient storytellers could never have imagined. The forbidden lesson outlived the teacher. This may explain why Azazel becomes such a powerful figure in later imagination. He represents a problem civilization can never completely solve. Knowledge has no reverse gear. Once a species discovers how to manipulate nature, the discovery cannot simply be removed from history. You can destroy a weapon. Someone remembers how to build another. You can kill an inventor. The invention remains. You can imprison the teacher. The students continue. There is another important distinction. The name Azazel also appears in Leviticus 16 in the ritual of the Day of Atonement, where one goat is sent into the wilderness for Azazel, depending on how the Hebrew is interpreted. Scholars have debated whether Azazel there represents a wilderness being, a place, or another concept. The Book of Enoch develops Azazel far more explicitly as a rebellious, supernatural figure. These traditions are related historically in complicated ways, but they should not simply be treated as identical descriptions. And archaeology cannot prove the supernatural being existed. What survives is the text. Fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls confirm the antiquity of Enochic traditions involving Azazel and the Watchers. Ancient people really did preserve this nightmare. Not an archaeological monster beneath the sea, but a story about a being whose knowledge poisoned civilization so deeply that heaven buried him alive in darkness. Perhaps that is why the punishment feels so severe. Azazel did not simply kill. He taught humans how to become better at killing one another. And according to Enoch, every act of corruption produced through that knowledge ultimately rested upon him. So Raphael bound his hands, bound his feet, covered his face, and sealed him beneath stones. But Azazel was still only one rebel. At number 2, the story becomes much larger, because the judgment was never about one angel. Approximately 200 watchers had descended. They had sworn together, sinned together, and when heaven finally answered, they would be imprisoned together. The Watchers. Number 2, the Watchers. The 200 angels bound beneath the earth. One prisoner is terrifying. 200 are something else entirely. Because according to the Book of Enoch, the catastrophe before the flood did not begin with a single fallen angel. It began with an organized descent. A group of heavenly beings looked down upon humanity. They desired human women. They understood that crossing the boundary would bring consequences, and they descended anyway. They were known as the Watchers. In 1 Enoch 6, their number is given as approximately 200. Led by Semyaza, they descend upon Mount Hermon, where they swear an oath binding themselves to their decision. This detail changes everything. The rebellion is not spontaneous, it is coordinated. Semyaza fears the others may abandon the plan, leaving him alone to answer for the crime. So the Watchers collectively swear that none will turn back. Then they enter the human world. They take wives, they have children, and they begin revealing knowledge. 1 Enoch 7-8 describes the consequences. Azazel teaches humans to manufacture swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. Other Watchers reveal enchantments, celestial signs, astrology, and knowledge associated with the movements of heavenly bodies. The boundary between heaven and earth has been breached. Then the offspring arrive, the giants. Their appetite becomes impossible to sustain. They consume what humanity produces. Then they turn against animals, eventually against humans. Blood spreads across the earth. The world becomes violent enough that the cries of humanity reach heaven. The response is not negotiation, it is judgment. In 1 Enoch 10, divine commands are issued against the beings responsible. Azazel receives his own punishment in Dudael, but Simyaza and his companions face collective imprisonment. The archangel Michael is instructed to bind Simyaza and those associated with him. The text describes them being confined for 70 generations within the valleys of the earth until the day of their judgment. They are not allowed to simply return to heaven. They are not permitted to disappear. They remain prisoners, waiting. And this is where centuries of retelling have transformed Enoch's cosmic geography into something even more literal. Modern versions sometimes claim the Watchers were sealed beneath the ocean floor. Some place them beneath impossible depths, imagining chains under mountains of sediment and black water. But the ancient text does not give us that map. It does not identify the Atlantic. It does not name the Pacific. It does not tell us that 200 physical angelic bodies are located beneath a particular seabed. Enoch describes underground confinement, valleys, darkness, fiery prisons, and terrifying cosmic regions. These belong to an ancient conception of the universe. Turning them into a modern underwater archaeological location goes beyond the evidence. And no scientific expedition has discovered imprisoned Watchers. No sonar image proves their existence. No skeleton, chain, chamber, or artifact has been authenticated as evidence of these beings. What archaeology has found is different. At Qumran, among the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars recovered Aramaic fragments belonging to Enochic literature. Those fragments proved that stories surrounding Enoch, heavenly rebellion, forbidden knowledge, and supernatural judgment circulated within ancient Jewish communities more than 2,000 years ago. The prison cannot be excavated. The belief can. And perhaps that is where the real horror survives. The Watcher's story imagines civilization itself as contaminated by knowledge received through an act of rebellion. Weapons, secret arts, celestial knowledge. Techniques humans continue using after their teachers have vanished. The beings are imprisoned, but their influence remains above ground. There is also something deeply unsettling about the number. 200. Not one devil tempting humanity. Not one monster escaping from darkness. An entire population of heavenly beings collectively choosing transgression. They descend together, swear together, teach together, and eventually, they are bound together. Within the narrative, their imprisonment reverses the oath on Mount Hermon. They once bound themselves voluntarily, so no Watcher could abandon the others. Now, another authority binds them, so none can escape punishment. The first binding created rebellion. The second ends it. But only temporarily, because Enoch's prisons are not eternal storage chambers. They are waiting rooms for judgment. The prisoners remain there until an appointed moment when confinement ends and final punishment begins. That transforms the entire image. A sealed tomb is frightening because something dead lies inside. A prison is frightening because something living does. And according to the world imagined by Enoch, somewhere beneath the human realm, the rebels who once descended from heaven were not forgotten. They were contained. But they were not the worst things their rebellion created, because the Watchers had children. Enormous beings born from the collision of two worlds. They consumed the earth. They killed. They were eventually destroyed, yet according to 1 Enoch, death did not completely remove them. Their bodies died. Something else remained. At number 1, the giants. And the evil spirits, Enoch says, came from their dead bodies. Number 1, the giants. The beings whose bodies died, but whose spirits remained. The Watchers could be chained. Azazel could be buried beneath stone. Simyaza and his companions could be confined in the depths of the earth. But their rebellion had already produced something heaven could not simply imprison. Their children. According to the Book of Enoch, when the Watchers descended from heaven and took human women, the offspring of those unions were beings of impossible scale, the giants, often connected in later interpretation with the Nephilim of Genesis. And what happens to them reveals that the title of this countdown hides something even darker than creatures sealed beneath the ocean. Because the giants were not simply imprisoned. they died. But according to Enoch, something inside them survived. In 1 Enoch 7, the women taken by the Watchers become pregnant and give birth to enormous giants. Some manuscript traditions preserve fantastic measurements for their height, but these figures vary and should not be treated as biological data. The point is unmistakable. They are monstrous. Their appetite overwhelms human civilization. At first, they consume what people produce. Then the resources run out. The giants turn against humanity. They consume animals. Violence spreads between species. Blood covers the earth. The natural order begins collapsing. This is not merely a story about enormous creatures. It is a story about boundaries being broken. Heaven and earth were not supposed to mix in this way. The Watchers crossed that boundary. The giants were the consequence. Then judgment arrives. The archangel Gabriel is commanded to turn the offspring of the Watchers against one another. The giants destroy themselves through violence. The coming flood will cleanse the corrupted world. But their deaths create another problem. In 1 Enoch 15-16, Enoch receives an explanation of what will happen to the spirits originating from these dead giants. Because the giants possess a divided origin, part heavenly, part earthly. Their physical bodies belong to the earth and can be destroyed, but their spirits do not simply disappear. The text describes the spirits proceeding from their bodies as evil spirits upon the earth. They remain. They oppress. They attack. They cause destruction. They require no food, yet hunger. They are connected with violence against humanity until the time of final judgment. This passage became enormously influential in later discussions of the origins of demons. Within this Enochic framework, at least, evil spirits are not simply fallen angels under another name. They emerge from the dead offspring of the Watchers. The giants die. Their spirits become something else. And this is where our entire countdown changes. The Book of Enoch does not actually list 10 ancient beings individually sealed beneath the ocean floor. It never gives us 10 underwater prisons. It never provides coordinates. It never describes creatures sleeping beneath miles of seabed, waiting for archaeologists to discover them. That is modern imagery imposed upon a much older cosmology. What Enoch actually describes is stranger. Azazel is bound and cast into Dudael, covered with rough stones and darkness. Simyaza and his companions are confined within the earth until judgment. Elsewhere, Enoch witnesses terrifying cosmic prisons prepared for rebellious heavenly beings. But the giants? Their bodies are destroyed. Their spirits remain above. So the final horror is not something trapped beneath us. It is something that, within the logic of the text, was never completely sealed away. There is no scientific evidence that giant human-angel hybrids once inhabited prehistoric Earth. No authenticated archaeological skeleton demonstrates the existence of Enoch's giants. Images circulating online of enormous human skeletons are frequently misidentified, manipulated, or disconnected from legitimate archaeological contexts. The Book of Enoch is evidence for ancient religious belief, not biological evidence for a lost species. Yet the text itself is genuinely ancient. Aramaic fragments recovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls demonstrate that Enochic traditions circulated in Jewish communities during the centuries around the Second Temple period. And the Book of the Watchers preserves a worldview in which humanity's corruption began before ordinary human civilization could fully understand what had happened. That may be the most unsettling element of the entire story. Humanity inherits consequences from a crime it did not begin. The Watchers descend. They reveal forbidden knowledge. The giants appear. The world becomes violent. Heaven intervenes. The teachers are imprisoned. Their offspring are killed. But the contamination remains. Weapons remain. Forbidden knowledge remains. And according to Enoch, the spirits of the giants remain. Perhaps that is why stories of demons became so enduring. Invisible evil is more frightening than a giant. A giant can be seen approaching. A giant has a body. A body can bleed. A body can die. But something without a body cannot be buried. You cannot place a stone over it. You cannot lock it beneath a mountain. You cannot drown it beneath an ocean. The Watchers received prisons. Azazel received darkness. The giants received death. And somehow, death was not enough. Thousands of years later, the civilization that preserved these stories has changed beyond recognition. Ancient kingdoms disappeared. Temples fell. Languages died. The manuscripts themselves were buried and forgotten. Then humans entered caves near the Dead Sea and found fragments of the nightmare again. Perhaps nothing waits beneath the ocean floor. Perhaps there were never chains beneath the earth. But the ancient warning survived anyway. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some knowledge, once released, cannot be forgotten. And some things, according to the Book of Enoch, could not be buried, even by God.